First, thank you for joining us for creating cultures of equitable belonging in the classroom using the 21-day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge. My name is Dinah Mack. I'm the Education Program Manager at Massachusetts Farm to School. Mass Farm to School is an organization that works to strengthen local farms and fisheries and promote healthy communities by increasing local food purchasing and education at schools. Our statewide work focuses on professional development to school staff and others, technical assistance, network building, and advocacy for farm to school policies. Please keep an eye out for future professional development and networking opportunities outside of this week's conference. I'm very excited to introduce a speaker for this session, Karen Spiller. Karen is the principal of CAS Consulting and Thomas W. Haas Professor in Sustainable Food Systems at University of New Hampshire, Durham. Karen Spiller, with over 20 years of experience, is a principal of CAS Consulting with a focus on racial equity and intersectionality. Karen works with local, state, regional, and national organizations committed to creating equitable public health and sustainable food systems. Involved in statewide and regional food system work, Karen is a steering committee member of and Massachusetts ambassador for Food Solutions New England, a 6-state multicultural, multi-generational network focused on food systems, transformation with racial equity at its core. She currently is a board member of the Boston Food Forest Coalition, Sustainable Business Network of Massachusetts, NOFA Mass, and American Independent Business Alliance. Karen is also a founding member of Southern New England Farmers of Color Collaborative. As a Thomas W. Haas Professor in Sustainable Food Systems at University of New Hampshire, Durham, Karen is engaged in scholarship on the intersection of networks and racial equity across the campus and its surrounding community, extending to higher education partners nationally and internationally. Celebrating its 8th year of national and international participation in April, Karen co-leads FNSNE's 21-day habit building challenge designed to build skill and will and action to address racial inequities through a food system lens. So welcome, Karen, and I'm gonna give you the floor.
Thank you, Dinah. I appreciate that. And thank you again for inviting me to be in this space and to be able to share the work of Food Solutions New England, and particularly the challenge, the Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge that we have developed, curated over the last 8 years. So today, this is really thinking about what can we be doing in our classrooms to connect and prepare our children for being contributing human beings, caring human beings, contributing to the community, to their neighborhood, to whatever profession or career they choose, but recognizing that all this is part of our roles as educators, as caregivers, as nurturers, as mentors. So the session is designed for that purpose, for us to be able to deal deeply and feel deeply on this topic. So creating cultures of equitable belonging in the classroom using the 21-day Racial Equity Challenge is the title. And the desired outcomes are, we want to reflect on the history and still existing inequities in our food system, all intersecting systems. And using the challenge, the Food Solutions New England 21-day Racial Equity Challenge, to explore the ways and strategies to prepare our younger students and to be thoughtful, brave, and just be their full selves, and build a menu of possibilities for our school communities. In that, we'll also be looking at what, in terms of the history of FS&E, what brought it to design and curate the 21-day Racial Equity Challenge, how it works. And we'll reflect on a few of the topics from the most recent challenge we just had, April 4th through April 24th. And really, again, build a menu, thinking about what are the possibilities? What are the possibilities for us to be able to take this tool into our classrooms? So before we move on, one of the things that community agreements, we have this as an important piece. But before I even start there, I would like to, in our Food Solutions New England culture and our practice, we acknowledge the area in which we are. And so I'm actually in New England, in New Hampshire right now. And so we at FS&E, we honor and respect the many indigenous peoples connected to this territory, the territory of New England, what is still home to the Penobscot, Pamuskwaty, Mosack, Macmac, Abenaki, Mohegan, Wampanoag, Pinnacock, Nipmuc, Massachusetts, Pinnacock, and Narragansett peoples, and among others. And we understand, and we certainly encourage you to learn more about who was traditionally on these lands that we are occupying, who is still there, and how we can work to support their efforts for sovereignty and well-being, rematuration and reclamation. And we hope that you will do this the same wherever you are. There's also a practice that we have with Food Solutions in New England, is we always bring in a moment of silence, a moment of pause through reading a verse, a poem, or a quote. We recognize that we have been moving quickly through the day, any day, and so we're kind of making that transition, the shift from all that we've been doing and all that we've been engaged in, to just pause and pause for this hour and a half that we'll be together exploring the possibilities of, again, the 21-day racial equity challenge being a tool for us in our classrooms, in our young people, our children, our next generation. So I want to share this in the spirit of where we are right now, where we are physically, emotionally, spiritually. And it is something that was written by Isabel Wilkerson, and it's from Cast. America is an old house. We can never declare the work over. When flood, drought, and human upheavals batter a structure that is already fighting whatever flaws were left unattended in the original foundation. When you live in an old house, you may not want to go into the basement after a storm to see what the rains have wrought. Choose not to look, however, at your own peril. The owner of an old house knows that whatever you are ignoring will never go away. Whatever is lurking will fester whether you choose to look or not. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of inaction. Whatever you're wishing away will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what would rather not see. It will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what you would rather not see. So when we think about the work of addressing racial inequities in our food system, in all our systems, we are forced to, have to, and with courage, and with grace, and with love, we have to face and also commit to making changes within ourselves, within our structures, within our communities, so that we can be better, stronger, and smarter, and a community that lifts, honors, serves, and feeds us all when we're thinking about our food system. So that's a grounding place for us to start this time together. And one of the other grounding pieces that we really lift up with Food Solutions New England is what we call community agreements. And community agreements are those things that hold us together when we have those tough conversations, when we're working on things that we all have different experiences with and different understandings and different lived experience and frames of which we bring to that work. And so that we look at that as a way of really moving through the challenging conversations in our schools and our communities about privilege, power, history, culture, inequity, pain, and injustice. And we do that we build those community agreements together so that they reflect. The important thing when we're working together in community, we want to be able to create the space that we all are feeling that we can bring our full selves, we can move in, we can be embraced, we can contribute. That really is what we all want to be able to do, whatever role we're playing, we want to be able to contribute and be seen, be heard, and be welcomed in. So the community agreements are a way to do that. So we're going to show you next is something that was designed by a group of people in a session just like this one. When I asked the question, what do you need to feel comfortable? What do you need to feel whole? What do you feel? What do you need in that space, in the working and collaboration with others for you to be able to, again, full self, fully contribute, and fully be valued? So there's something called the 4 Agreements of Courageous Conversations. You probably have heard about this one. Courageous Conversations about Race, a field study for achieving equity in schools, Lynn Singleton and Curtis Linton. And they had the 4, they were looking at stay engaged, lean in, experience discomfort. Just know that if you're in any setting that you're doing work, and if you're doing good work, it's going to be moving when there is a little bit of discomfort, because you really want to be pushed, you want to be moved, you want to be at a different place at the end of that than you were when you first entered into that engagement, in that conversation, in that learning. We also, and I said earlier about your value and you being valued, is speaking your truth, but yes, also speaking your truth with awareness that your truth may not be Lisa's truth, it may not be Dana's, it might not be, but it is valued, and in that same way, valuing the truth of others. And the 4th one is expect and accept non-closure. Most of the time we're in settings that we are always creating and evolving, and being open to that, not having it in a nice bow and handed over is really important, because it also gives the opportunities. We see the challenges as opportunities instead of the roadblocks to stop us. We see the opportunities for continuing to move and to, I call it, solutionize and strategize together, knowing that we may not come to the end. It may not be a period. And those who know me well know that I often think of pause. We're not going to end this, we're pausing this. So this is the Jamboard. Some of the things here are listen deeply, allowing creativity, upholding integrity, assume the best intent, but that does also mean that I am responsible for the impact. So that's really important for us to always recognize that we have to be sensitive, be aware, be connected to how what I intended may not have been received. And so it really is, when you're in community, you're always pulling in and trying to understand and more deeply connect, deeply listen, and deeply be engaged. Something that when we have our larger groups, we have the tendency for those who have been thinking about whatever that topic is, whatever that project is, whatever that issue is, that they have the whole list of how to resolve it and strategize it. And so they're very quick to speak. And so when they're speaking quickly, others are really still processing and still, thinking about this to this to this. And so it really is important for us to think about making space, take space. Those of us who are those who speak quickly or often, to pause and let others have an opportunity to share their thoughts. One of the strategies that I've been using lately is 3 before me. So if I'm really counting, sometimes it's hard to recognize one is speaking too many times. But if you count 3 people before you speak again, then that's pretty fair in terms of the stepping up, stepping back, 3 before me, and make space, take space. So those are some of the ways, and certainly to create the dynamic exchange of thoughts. And yes, we bring our feelings in this too. And it's so important for us to be thinking about it in that way. So these are the community agreements for Food Solutions New England. We have them for our network team. Our network team is a group of about 30 people that come together on a regular basis to make plans, strategize, as well as commitments around what we're going to be doing in our individual organizations and state in service of a food system that feeds and serves us all. So it's really a tool that we found very important for us to build relationship and extend relationship, and again, honor the contributions of all of us who come to the table. So I'm going to go and continue to give you a little bit of the history, and not that we need it, but I think it's always helpful to have a review, or at least a shared understanding of where we are coming from in all of this. And it's really important for us to understand, and you all have been thinking about this, and you cannot walk away from this, the fact that the nation was built on the back of slavery and racism. It has most of the structures have been designed to uphold that. The practices and beliefs that are actively killing us, literally, represent that. And it's just the facts. So it is someone who is not going into the basement of their old house who would walk away and say that it's not present, it's not living and breathing, and it's not literally killing us. When we think about our lives are intersecting, intertwined, and we think about the pain of one is a pain of all, and we think about wealth and poverty. Your poverty is mine, and your wealth could be mine as well if it was extended to that place of belonging. So I'm going to move on from that to speak a little bit about diversity. And it's really important that when we think about diversity, it has this, we talk about it all the time. I think that's one of the things that's recognized when we speak of words. I will say this, and I will say this and say this many times. It's really important. You see the slide here. It tells you what diversity is. And it is multi-sector, it's multi-layered. And it really is most important for us to start saying what we mean instead of using a word. Because again, we have to recognize that lived experience, socialization, beliefs, assumptions all play into our even understanding of this word and any other words we use. But when we think of diversity, it does refer to ethnicity and age and nationality and geography and gender, sexual orientation, class, language, religious, immigration status, race, ability, physical, all of those are there. But what's really interesting, and I like to lift this up, is that when we think about diversity, we have to think about the origin of it. Just didn't start being used as an effort or a action, or even as a active word in our day-to-day conversations. But when we look at the first modern equal employment legislation, it was introduced in Congress in 1943. And that was in 1948, the President Truman signed the Executive Order 9981 to desegregate the armed forces, which some scholars cite as the first diversity initiative in the workplace. 1943, 1948. That executive order required equality, and there was equality, it's equal treatment and opportunity in the armed forces. However, it did not expressly forbid segregation. You can be equally there, but separated in efforts and position. And as a result of that, in 1953, 95% of African American soldiers were serving in integrated units. So by 1953, they started recognizing that diversity needed a little inclusion. So when we talk about also, these are the terms that are often used, we think about inclusion. And inclusion is this whole that we're now thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when we think about inclusion, that is, that one circle, that image, I love the image where all the dots, no matter what color, they're all in that circle, meaning they all have a place at the table, a place in that community, they have a place. So certainly, you talk about the movement from exclusion to segregation, integration. Exclusion when there's a pocket of people in the middle, and then there's a periphery where others are, and they never get in. That line is a really tough line. You can't get through it, can't get over it, can't get under it. And then we have the segregation where you have your own, that thing I just mentioned in terms of that law. You have a circle that you can be over here, but you can't be over here. We'll give you the equal opportunity, but you do it here and we do it there. And then integration was that next stage where you just take the bubble inside the other bubble, but the inclusion is what we're really looking for. And that was conceived in 1948 with the declaration adopted at the UN General Assembly on the International Bill of Rights, which recognizes that all human beings are born free and equal. We're still talking about equal here, in dignity and rights. And this declaration fundamentally seeks to deal with the issues of discrimination at all levels in every facet of society. And so that's accomplished by bringing together traditionally excluded individuals and groups into processes, activities, decision policy making in a way that they share the power. So that's when we say we're looking at inclusion. But also, I think it's always important for us to recognize that this is 2022, we're talking about inclusion, and it started being a thing in 1948, and we're still working on inclusion. So next, that equity piece, racial equity, we're looking at that is a condition that would be achieved if one's racial identity no longer predicted, or in a statistical sense, how one fares, how one lives, how one prospers, how one is welcomed, how one is received, how one is cared for, what pathways are given or not. And we use that term, we're thinking about racial equity as one part of racial justice. And we work to address the root causes and inequities, not just the manifestation of that. So when we think about racial equity, we're thinking about eliminating policies and practices and attitudes and cultures and those messaging that reinforces the differential outcomes by race or fail to eliminate them. So it also, when we do that, what we achieve with racial equity is people, including people of color, are owners, are planners and decision makers in the systems that govern their lives. We also acknowledge and account for past and current inequities and provide all people, particularly those most impacted by racial inequities, the infrastructure needed to thrive. And then, as I already stated in different ways, everyone benefits from a more just and equitable system. Everyone is lifted up. The good of one serves, feeds, fuels the good of all. So I want to share this next image really quickly. And it's an old image that has been redesigned and repurposed and reimagined. And that's what we do when we're evolving. And one of the things about it that I like is that it shows you that we have 3 boxes there. And when we say equity, everyone has one of those boxes. But when we're talking equality, when we're talking about equity, it's people have what they need. So looking at this, the little guy on the right needs 2. He needs more to be able to watch that game with his friends. The middle only needed 1. And it's recognizing that the difference, again, the same. Equality is the same. Equity is people having what they need to contribute, to participate, to feel a part of. The other piece about this that I love in this particular image is that when they had their 1 boxes, they're there, but they're not engaged. They're not engaged in that experience. And you actually see them engaged together in this. So there's something about that, recognizing there are 3 boxes, there's still 3 boxes, no one lost any access to that particular goal they wanted of watching that game. They're all able to watch it, energy is higher, engagement's higher, and it hasn't cost them anything. It's just a redistribution of resources that they had. Again, redistribution of the resources that they had. So when we think about equality, it's the same. Equity is what people need. And again, we want to thrive, strive, and head for equity as our goal. Okay. So next, these are just like entry points for our conversation later. This is all of the pieces of learning and shared learning and skill building that, again, as the network of FSMA, we spent time understanding and really digging in to what this meant for us individually, because it is a me first, so that I can be a contributor to the we. And so when we're thinking about this, these are the levels of oppression, levels of racism, and it's always important when we're talking about undoing to recognize what the levels are and how they impact. And I'm going to do this really, really quickly because we talk about the micro level is, that's more interpersonal, it's more individualized, and internalized is a set of private beliefs and practices and ideas that individuals have. You internalize, and for people of color, you're internalizing the messages that you receive and trying to process that in the context of all of the policies, practices, and systems that are not serving you. When we think about the interpersonal, back still micro, that's the expression of racism between individuals. It's how I respond to you. It's how I engage with you. So it's really, it's interpersonal. It's between the two of us, the three of us, the four of us. It's between groups. It can be all of that. And it occurs when individuals interact. That interpersonal is interacting. When we think about the micro level, we're thinking about institutional, and that's discriminatory treatment, unfair policies and practices, inequity and opportunities, and the impact within an organization and institution based on race. And then structurally, that's a system in which public policies, everything are external of those institutions. And then higher level institutional practices, cultural representation, and other forms of norms in various ways that are reinforcing that othering, that racist behavior, racist belief, racist behavior and practice in action. So we're going to continue on with just wanting to recognize again, this is where racial equity, racism, all of it intertwines and interconnects. And it's really important in terms of understanding the levels of racism. And I really am going through this very quickly because I'm going to trust that you all have been engaged in some kind of learning and skill building, and for many who are lived experience, really addressing what it looks like, what it feels like. And as you begin to think about how this is how we're experiencing it as adults, we have our children who are experiencing it and not having necessarily a frame or way to communicate it or a way to manage it or move through it. So it's really important to understand that, from our adult world, at the same time, our children, our little ones, are experiencing it in the sometimes even a macro way because of the lack of being able to understand the feeling it's their fault and something wrong with them. So when we think about it, the feelings that we have as adults around all of this, we amplify that for our little ones. And so it's when we're thinking about the teaching of the skill of the mathematics and the English and social studies and all of the core root skills of academic success for our children from K to 12, we really have to think about those, and I call it those little spirits, and what they need to help them be and fully absorb the textbook and have the confidence and the courage to be able to be themselves and be their full selves in this time in which we live. So when we talk about racial equity in action, we want to talk about what does food have to do with it. I'm going to speak with this because that was one of the things that was important to us as Food Solutions New England, really recognizing that when we think about the inequities that we experience, they did start with land, they did start with food, and recognizing that and building from that is very, very important. So it's certainly a historical context when we go back to the colonists and the indigenous peoples losing their lives, losing their land, losing their, well, they didn't lose, but the effort to take away their culture, their beliefs, their values, that was all part of an effort to access the land. And so we think about history, context matters around the food system. The land grabs, the Black land loss later on in that whole piece. There's also the food system map. I'm going to share that quickly. And how the intersection is just similar to recognizing that these are all interconnected. There's the economics, there's a social, there's environmental, and there's a farming, and there are all these systems. There's a health system, we recognize that. There is the social center system, there is a political system, there's the economic and education and biological, all these systems. So that's one really important way of recognizing and thinking about the food system is all these pieces. And this system is just one system that has these intersecting, interdependent pieces, sections, sectors that are woven together, and that it's really hard for us to think of them not intertwined. So important for us to be thinking of the system as a whole. And when we think about our food system and as entities like and networks like Food Solutions New England, we have different sectors in that food system because we recognize that it does require all of us with all of our expertise, all of our knowledge, all of our skill and will to be able to transform the food system, which is what Food Solutions New England focuses on, to a food system that is just, sustainable, equitable, and feeds and serves us all. So when we talk about Food Solutions New England, I just want to give you a snapshot of that. It is a network. It's a network that envisions a powerful food movement that democratically transforms. We're talking about transformed, sustainable, just, and resilient food system. And we do that by really recognizing our multi-racial, six-state network, and the fact that it is designed, we designed it, to unite the food system community around our shared set of values. Democratic empowerment, racial equity, dignity for all, sustainability and trust. All of that strengthens us in the movement and ability to achieve the New England food vision. We started out thinking about it as 50% of our food be produced, entrepreneured, grown, harvested by 2060. And again, thinking of it in those ways of the democratic empowerment, the new food story, recognizing that there's diversity in our lived experience, there's diversity, beautiful diversity in our culture of food, the growing of food, the interaction of food, and lifting all that up. It's not monolithic, and the more we recognize the new food story as being all of our stories intertwined, intersected, interdependent, the closer and quickly we can get to our pathway, our vision of that food system that feeds and serves us all. And this I love this image because it's a just pathway. It tells you, this is where we're walking. This is where we're going. It shows you diverse people in that space. It shows you the waterways. It shows you the fishermen. It shows you the schools. It shows you the energy, the effort, the movement. I think is what always drives me on this one. is it shows a movement. And with that, we're thinking about a sustainable economy because we want our businesses, our fishermen and farmers and all those other interconnected businesses and advocates to all have what they need to be healthy and prosperous. And certainly when we're thinking about dignity, all of that is so important. We decided that it was one way for us to be thinking and understanding our network by impact areas. And so we were celebrating our 10th anniversary last year. And one of the things that we really have been thinking about is, the places where we spend our time and we spend our effort and we spend our energy. And those places are the network strengthening. So the network is so critical to us because the network is a way for us to build our skill and will together, but also maximize our strengths, our capacities, and recognize that in this work together, we are stronger, smarter, and better able to create something different, to build something different together. We certainly understand that it's important for us to continue to build our skill and will around equity and our values, holding those deeply, and leadership, building leadership around that and practice. It's very important to learn, but it's the doing. And as we do, we strengthen, and it just continues that intersectionality, and that circle of development continues. Shared narratives, I mentioned that earlier, that's an impact area because we recognize that it's so important for me to know your narrative, your story, and how your story evolves and how it intertwines and interconnects. I say that a lot because I really do believe that when we are in community, we are stronger, we are able to learn, we become something different with each new interaction. If we're staying in our own neighborhood without crossing the street into another, we're missing an opportunity to grow, to expand, to even share my history, share my love for this food, my love for okra, and why. Those personal stories are always ways for connection and finding commonality. The visionary policy, we need to create, yes, policies that feed and serve us all, that are equitable policies, that people do see themselves served and able to lean in and lean forward as a result of those policies. And so, we think about that is our regional food movement, aligning and growing and transforming, and that impact, as we work towards, will be benefiting and benefited for the entire region of New England and all of our 6 New England states. So I want to say a little bit about the challenge, and I want you to be able to get a sense of what the challenge is. So I'm going to move through this. The challenge is our 21 days, and we have been doing this for 8 years. This was our 8th year. And as we were building our skill and will, when we decided racial equity was one of our core values, one of our 4 core values, it really was important for us to, as a community, build our skill and will so that we could be not just advocates, but allies and accomplices. Allies are those who will go out and take a sign a petition. Accomplices are those who will lay their life down for you. They will make an introduction for you. They will make a pathway and say, go through it, Karen. Here it is. We're looking for those, on either side of you to steady you, walking, pushing you when you need a little bit of a nudge to keep going. And again, creating that pathway. That's what an accomplice is. So the challenge was something that we, again, were looking for a way to build our skill and will. And Debbie Irving, Waking Up White, that is her authored book. Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. is the founder of the Privilege Institute and the White Privilege Conference. And Dr. Marguerite Penix is a faculty at University of Minnesota. And the three of them created the challenge as a tool, again, for people to build their skill and will. But Debbie was really the one that we reached into to say, Debbie, could we use this initial concept of 21 day and make it food system focused? And she said yes. She said that was something that people had not been thinking about, and how fundamental it was to race and racism, and she wanted to support that. So with their blessings, we launched the 21 day. We've made it iterable in terms of the way it's evolved from always the prompts. I'll describe that to you there, but we were always thinking about what next by input, because people do take the challenge individually. And after a few years, certainly after 3, many of them were thinking about, how do I bring this to my organization? How do I bring this to my Girl Scouts? How do I bring this to my school? How do I bring this to? And so we then expanded it to different pieces that included even a facilitator's workshop. We always have orientation for new learners in the 21 day. But it is research-based, it's peer review. We have articles and books, we have references from others in the field. It's structured as videos and instructional tools by leading organizations, and invited blog posts. And we really encourage you to take a look at those and the curated resources. And participants over the years have been diverse, as across the country and internationally. We've had as many as 9,000 people participate from 42 countries and over 9 provinces in Canada, and anyone from community activists, students, soil scientists, academia, classroom, farmers, fishermen, healthcare, and it's part of the sector of healthcare professionals. And really, I just want to lift up anyone who eats has been engaged in the challenge. I'm going to share a little bit how it works. I shared a little bit about that in the moment we just passed. But the daily prompts are designed with those resources, those videos, but it's a topic driven. And it really is a way for us to build skill around a particular topic. And you get an email. Once you sign up, you get lots of communication with us, because we like to stay engaged with you during the challenge. But we certainly, every morning by 6 a.m., you have an email in your inbox that is inviting you to that day's prompt. And there's also an opportunity in that there is the learn, the act, and going deeper. So there's certainly the readings, and we have 3 readings or 3 videos, but we try to manage it so it's not more than 2 hours of time. It also provides you the opportunity for an action, whether it's going to your school and engaging with the healthcare professional on a particular topic related to what you've learned. There's also the going deeper for lots of resources. One of the things that we have been intentional about is, you might find the challenges long, because we are intentional about creating as much space as we can for that, and opportunity for learning. So we encourage you, we have the weekly Challenge Fridays, which is an opportunity for people who are taking the challenge to come together and dialogue, share their thoughts and reflections, which has really been amazing from the standpoint that you will meet people from across the country, and people that are doing different types of work than you are. Not everybody in the challenge is food system like we are, but they are eaters. and they are looking at how they can build their skill, will, and take action. So that's how it works. There's tools. We created a discussion guide. Again, after several years, people were wanting to know what to do as a group. So we first had an orientation that's online opportunity there. And then we had a one day, our first one day was before the pandemic happened. And we had a host of participants from all 6 New England states going back to their organization. So the discussion guide is a tool that you can use. It gives you steps on how to recruit members to be a part of your groups. It gives you some more tips on the community agreements, how to handle tough conversations, challenging conversations, how to move the group, how to organize an agenda. All that's in this discussion guide. So it's really, we love it, and we found that people are very much engaged with it. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about the challenge in action on campus. And I think this will give you some ideas of what you could be doing in the classroom, because the content is there, and it's how do you make that content, and how do you transform the content for classroom, to integrate it into your social studies, integrate it in your health class, integrate it in even math and science classes. But on campuses, their universities are amplifying it into their mission statements. It certainly would be something that a school and school body would have in the mission statement, where it really is aligning with the values and vision of equity in all systems, and engaging administration and faculty and staff in that. So that's something that has been happening on university campuses. And so this is something that certainly is transferable to the K through 12. And certainly we talk about the faculty, and faculty has been incorporated into the syllabi, whether it's an ag course, nutrition course, it doesn't matter what the topic is. They are thinking about how and doing the integration of this work into that discipline. And something else that they've been doing on campus is creating opportunities for student-led campus conversations. Being able to peer-to-peer is so important, and it gives students a place to share their thoughts in ways that they may not with their faculty, their teacher, with the adults. And then certainly hosting point of service and learning activities. The dining service has really been amazing at the universities, where they're actually creating 21-day menu items, so that is a way for people to learn about the equity in the vendor as well as equity in the food and culture. So a couple of more examples I just wanted to share with you in terms of what has happened at universities, and I'm speaking for UNH. Certainly there is, just as there is on campus, opportunity for the media in terms of the podcast. There's lots of opportunity for creating dialogue in that. There is the online articles as well, the social media posts, and the Facebook and Instagram. And we spent a great amount of time around Did You Know? And that's also been activity for students to be able to do some research on what they're most interested in the food system, and identifying facts that they want to share. And those actually are what became the Instagram post of Did You Know? And so next I'll just mention the thing about doing surveys and getting engagement, finding out what do you have at home? What do you eat at home? What's in your pantry? And certainly, as we're doing today, those field trips, those opportunities on the land, to be on the land, to taste what's being grown on the land. And this was really an exciting one at UNH, where the Chef Todd did cooking demos and videoed those. And those were another way for people, whatever was in their pantry, this was during the pandemic, we asked what was in their pantry, and from that he did menus and did demos related to that. But that's examples of what universities do and have done with the challenge. Certainly the library has been a place for curating books to recommend, articles to recommend. The UNH Diamond Library actually created a whole 21-day guide for more resources and again, videos, articles, books on that. And on the left is an example of the challenge Thursdays that once the group was doing, where again, peer-led, peer discussion for the opportunity of growth. So I just want to mention the themes for the 21 day this year was regrounding, revelation and reckoning, and reseeding fierce futures. And so each day had a particular topic. The topics range from socialization and liberation, understanding our own way that we have been socialized and grown up, those communities, those homes, those ways of thinking and beliefs. Certainly Indigenous history, legacy of slavery, confronting white privilege and supremacy and rage and shame. And then revelation was around the levels of racism, health and healthcare, the racial wealth gap. And we spent a little more time going into the culture of change in organizations when they're thinking about shifting their institutional racism to be more equitable and belonging. And then addressing food justice. And then lastly, on the third week, we focused on reparations and the narrative power of strategy and radical imagination, because that's where we really want to take all of what we're learning, reseeding the future. What does it look like, and what can we take into it that will amplify, give us energy, fuel us again to become something different and create this community of belonging. Certainly respect and support for self-determination and decolonizing and repatriation, and building intersectional fusion of power. And we certainly end that week with raising the next generation. How important it is for us as adults. We are responsible for our children. The health of community is measured by the health of its children. And that is something that one of my mentors shared very early on. And as educators, that's why we chose this profession, is to be that and make the pathway for that. So this is where the thinking about strategies for that menu of possibilities, thinking about how could we bring in elements of the challenge into our classroom? How could we weave it in to our sessions, our class curriculum, just like university faculty have been doing across the country for a number of years, intentionally weaving whatever that core curriculum is and finding that space, creating that space for deeper learning in relation to equity. I'd love it if there were any questions. Any questions?
Karen, thank you for that. There's so much to think about in what you just shared. I mean, I think one question that comes to my mind is, thinking about my own experience. I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I was for 20 years as a social studies middle school educator. Now I'm with Mass Farmers School. And so I'm getting to, I've done a lot of educator development throughout the years as well. And so I think one question that I have, in thinking about your resources, and I've gotten to do them with Mass Farm to School for the past couple of years. It's been really enriching. Is if you recommend that educators front load an exploration, almost like you did in this presentation, of looking at these micro and these macro, racism, and looking at identity and the meaning of diversity and equity and equality, and doing that front loading before doing this, or if students could use these resources and be doing that work while. And I think I think you could do either, right? Either or, but I'm wondering what you would recommend.
Oh, I would say, so I think this is the beauty of it, really, because it really is your preference, your style. I think that there is a beauty of integrating it in bite-sized pieces, so it doesn't feel like, because sometimes when we front load, then we're done, right? We've done it. But when we're doing what you're saying the other way, is that it's going to be in at least, you have what, 30 lessons, it's going to be at least 15, but it's going to be a thread. I'm thinking about it as a threading it through, not here and here, or here and not here. I think that that's what, even as individuals, as people, it's not the 21 day and we're done. We think of the 21 day as 365 days. So 21 day is getting ready, right? And after that, we've got all this. We can go back to it. We can integrate it. We can practice it. We can say, oh, wait, what you read yesterday, we know this to be true. We've heard this over and over again from our colleagues and friends, that they can read that same article the next year and see something different, because again, you're different. So I think it's really great to have to play with it a little bit, and if you call it experiment a little bit, and find out what really is the rhythm for you as the one who's bringing it in. But I absolutely would encourage finding multiple places, and not just make it one time, but multiple places that you bring it in. And it's, again, it is brought in different ways, in different places all the time. So it's just, it really is, if we're really deciding that as educators, as adults responsible for the health of our children, this is a 24/7 for us as well. So we're thinking about it, and we're looking for creative, music, art. There's so many ways of them even drawing something, or going to the museum and seeing something together, and then responding to it in writing. Music, movement. There are all kinds of ways that we can bring this fullness of ourselves, because remember, we know we all learn differently, and that's why in the challenge we do the multiple ways, the videos, the art, the peer review, and the research documented, and the quotes and the poems, because we all learn and receive differently, and we want to recognize that and invite that. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any questions? We had some people join and leave, and we'll definitely be sharing this. Rowan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have any questions, please feel free to, you can put your camera on, or just put it in the chat if you have any questions as well.
I think that in my school career, I'm a sophomore. I'm hoping to work with youth a little bit more. And I think that especially right now, we're really seeing a lot of pushback from leaders, community members, in regards to providing resources and educating younger kids on more sensitive topics, or sensitive in air quotes, I guess I should say. So I wonder, Karen, if you had like any recommendation on how to address that kind of pushback.
Rowan, I would start it with the fact that if you integrate integrate the content into the subject matter, it works. It works. So it becomes a learning through the knowledge. It's not separate. It's not separate. So when we're thinking about, I think you could even talk about it from the science of things, or we talk about a lot of the practices for growing came from indigenous and people of color. It would be always an interesting project to do some invention project, find out who invented what and when. So that does ground it in identity and socialization in terms of the traffic light was designed, invented by a man of color. We think about the CSA, that was an old concept in terms of how do we share community, how do we share our crops. So there are lots of places that you can take little known or little brought in content and into the curriculum. What I think, when I think about it most, I think about, we want our children to be bold and brave. We want them to feel that confident in who they are, and that they have something to bring, something to give, and that they're welcomed. And honoring their heritage, honoring their culture, by speaking about their favorite foods, telling the stories, giving them opportunity to tell the stories, or write the stories, or draw the stories that make them happy or bring them joy, or the first time they learn to. I think that we don't do enough of that to honor who they are as we're building who they can be. So it's almost like we sometimes have to leave who we are at home and come and pretend to be something else. And we find that, and all of us feel that at some point at times in terms of our own growth and development into adulthood. But we need to be able to create more spaces that we honor and welcome. Again, we welcome that we wear different clothes, but we also wear clothes. We welcome that we have different food we eat, but we all eat food. Let's talk about the commonalities, and let's let them celebrate each other's commonalities and things they share, so that they could begin the pattern of belonging as little people and seeing themselves as contributing citizens in a humane and caring and with grace and love. Because I think about it a lot, is that they mirror what they see. We mirrored what we saw. And it wasn't until a certain point in all our lives that we decided, we either decided, okay, I like that, or we said, wait, I don't like that. And you shift it, you change it. Or you learned from being in community with other people that thing that you were doing is just not helpful in the community building relationships and love and care. But we do start from, because I'm speaking, learning how to walk. Learning how to speak the adult language. I mean, we were speaking fine before we had to talk. The baby talk wasn't good enough anymore, right? And so we had to speak like the adults do, and had to learn that and mimic that. And so that is how we come into the world, as little beings absorbing everything that's around us, and sometimes, again, not knowing how to process, not what it means, and not taking it in, and not being so hurt and wounded by the things that we have no control over and that were not because of us, but because of systems, because of structures, because of practices that just weren't here to support and lift us up. So I would encourage the thinking next is to that menu of possibilities. Think about the ways you could bring it in, the ways that you can integrate it through stories, through activities. And it really is something I would love to work on and plan on and create with you. But it's something that we would do together. So I did not intend to come here with a menu for you to do XYZ. It is for your classroom, your group of students, your group of little ones, and in your content area, your expertise, thinking about how this fits. Certainly it fits because we really want to create a space for our children, but also in the context of your space, in the context, yes, of your institution, context of the way your organization works. It would all be helpful for all of us if our organizations did have mission statements that were focusing on racial equity as a requirement, as a must, as a non-negotiable, because then that creates the culture of something different. So I encourage us to think about ways that we can activate our network, our close colleagues in our agencies, organizations, and our schools to be advocates for the more systemic changing in the schools structure. But in the meantime, we certainly can have, and I think it would be a fun and very rewarding experience to see how you can incorporate, how you can weave through, and I really call it weaving through, the 21-day racial equity challenge into your classroom. At the back of this, if you take it off, at the back of this, there are some resources. And so when you're looking at the slides, there's a go a couple more. Okay. Now here it's a whole lot. Okay. Go back once. Thank you. Here is a whole lot of links to toolkits and how to work with groups and resources. This is all found at our website, and that is amazing in terms of the resources are just endless. But Lisa, if you would go a couple more, what beyond the quote? Okay. So here are another resources. There are links to it, and then there's one more page, Lisa. Thank you. Oops, children, next generation. So this is just a snapshot. Embrace Race is an online community that they really focus on children and how we can support the community we can bring to them for them to become very, again, confident in who they are and be able to achieve, through it all. And then Raising Race Conscious Children, that's all of us. And that's another great resource in a group. Learning for Justice is another organization that has wonderful resources there for working with children. And then this is the challenge prompt this year on Next Generation, which again has a number of links, resources that are there to give you some ideas on how to how to structure, how to prepare, even prepare yourself for doing this. The other resources are here, food system and race, other things that are really helpful, but I just wanted to point those out as specifically, I wanted to make sure you saw the next generation for our children as tools there. And definitely day 19 of the challenge is still up there. And you still can access each of the days of the challenge. And that's the beauty of it. Many of our colleagues across the country, there's New Hampshire Food Alliance that in 2020 decided, it was a 2021, decided to, instead of doing 21 days, they did 21 weeks. And they took each day and spent a week with it and had a group of 25 to 30 people that participated. There are other agencies that across the country, there might WCA, and there are municipalities actually where they are taking the city employees and they're spending it all year long. There are other networks and business groups that are making sure that it's again, it's not 21 days, but the 21-day challenge gets you started and launches you to that 365 days of becoming something different, the transformation and just a deeper learning and action.
And it's just such a, this has been a really nice setup for, like you said, next steps. Where do people want to take this just really wealth of resources that are ready and so flexible and can be used in so many different ways? And you showed examples from university level. And I selfishly was thinking of Mass Farm to School and our role in this, this work and our position as professional development providers for educators and food service professionals, and just thinking of how, we're not in classrooms, so we're not taking this and making lesson plans, but what is our role in helping educators with that next step? And I don't have a question or even a solution answer. I just, where my head was thinking, what, how can we work this into our professional development offerings and make it a reasonable, like make it a usable tool to then for educators to feel comfortable and set up for success in then turning around and utilizing it in their classrooms. So I feel like, and I was thinking through as an educator, it would be valuable to be familiar and comfortable, go through the process before you're then adapting it for students. And so just wondering how we can encourage that with educators anyway.
Yeah, we could brainstorm that, but I think certainly one of the roles that you play so wonderfully is convening, right? And so convening opportunity for people, but I would love it if we could convene a coffee chat where people would brainstorm on how they might bring it into their classroom or how they would bring it into their school. And, as an offering, because I think that what I love is the opportunity when we come together with our different lived experiences, our different frames, all of that, we come with such richness. And I'm dropping these in the chat, Rowan, so you can get to them.
Lisa, I was also thinking this too. Just as my experience teaching is that a lot of creating curriculum is sharing and exchanging ideas. And I thought while Karen was speaking, I thought it would be interesting to have just a space for educators to talk about how would I use this, and if someone is using it, this is how I'm using it, and just kind of springboard it that way. Because it's such a rich, getting those emails, there's so much material and there's so many ways. And in middle schools, a lot of middle schools have a team model, right? And so you're on an integrated team where there's all the disciplines are on a team. And I was thinking like, how a team could take this on and different educators could do different parts across a building. And that would be a really interesting thing to think about with educators, because I think that often teachers are kind of like islands where they feel like they have to do everything, right? Or it's like can be really isolating. But when you're in a department or you're on an academic team, you have that opportunity to share, work with an art teacher, work with a music teacher, work collectively across a building. I think it'll be really interesting to find an administrator, at a secondary and at a middle who is committed to working in a school and then doing some kind of group discussion to spread that. I think it's really interesting. So we were thinking similarly.
So I think that would be amazing to convene, to host. And the series, again, as we were talking earlier, we don't want it to be one moment, but opportunity for a series of moments for people to join, share their thoughts, build on thoughts. So you all got the links for the next generation of our children. I just dropped them all in, including the challenge website link.
Yes, thank you. So just to be cognizant of time, we're just going to conclude. And Rowan, thanks so much for being here and participating. And Karen, thank you so much for this conversation.